Just gonna pound a 40 at Brian Johnson.
It's like you mix like collagen with water or something. I don't know.
Now I feel like we have to do this. All right, man. We always start with you introducing yourself to me. Slightly awkward, but not that awkward.
Okay, that's great.
And you can do it whenever you're ready.
Okay, so great to see you again. I'm Sam D'Amico, founder and CEO at Impulse Labs, and we're in San Francisco right now.
Yeah. What used to be in this?
So
building?
this used to be Saunders HQ, and I think it was Samsara's HQ. So at least there's good hardware startup bones in this building.
Yeah.
Based. And thanks to the magic of San Francisco commercial real estate, we're going to be able to we're able to have this amazing space. So
It's a good spot, man. How long have you guys been here?
just over a year.
Okay. And so for people who haven't heard of Impulse, what are you doing here?
So we build the most powerful and precise appliances on the planet, which wedge not really secretly, wedge batteries into people's houses. And this is part of a play to basically remake the grid in a distributed way, where instead of batteries being something you see as centralized, whether they're next to power plants, in the middle of like in like a parking lot in a city, or like maybe centralized even in your house, they're distributed right at the point of use of like all of these new electrified devices that we're installing in people's homes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's break this down a little bit. So the first product, if people follow you on Twitter,
If you follow me, I'm Stove Guy.
you're
Yeah?
Stove Guy. It's a induction.
We make an induction cooktop. It's called the Impulse Cooktop, very straightforward naming scheme. And it's about 3 times more powerful than any other stove in the market. So what that means in practicality is it takes let's think like a normal induction stove might take like 10 minutes to boil 10 cups of water. We can do that in a minute and a half. Or we also like to say like a liter in under 40 seconds is another thing to think about. So like basically as soon as you turn this thing on, the bubbles start appearing and it's boiling before you actually can do the next step on your cooking journey.
And there's people who will say, okay, but like induction stoves this is not a new concept.
Yep.
Yeah, and I see people say this sometimes on your.
They're like, yeah, how is this different than induction, right? And so it's different in 2 different ways, or actually more than 2 different ways, which makes this company kind of a mouthful in many respects. So first is, it is 3 times more powerful than any other induction stove in the market. And we can do that because of the fact that there's a lithium iron phosphate battery embedded inside. So we've got an additional 15,000 watts available at any point to basically surge into the device that on top of whatever the wall could supply as well. And what this means is we actually are now decoupled from what the normal wall electricity is. So normally when you install an electrified device in a home, you have to plan for the peak capacity of that device being supported by the wiring in your house, your electrical panel, your electrical service. Like you have to make sure PG&E like gives you the 60 amps needed for the induction stove, the transformers on your street, the power plant on the grid, all of these things have to be sized for this peak demand situation, which is frankly ridiculous because how many times, like what percentage of the day is you're running your stove on high? It's probably less than 1%.
Yeah.
Well below that actually. And even when your stove is on, it's running even below that. So turns out that by putting a battery inside the device, you can both make the device more awesome and essentially solve this problem that we're all talking about, where the grid is undergoing immense stress from all these new use cases and demands, whether they're AI, electric vehicle chargers, induction stoves, heat pumps, you name it.
And then, okay, in terms of the precision, is that different from other induction stoves as well?
So again, this goes into why would you buy this product over another induction stove? Even if let's imagine you've got 240 volts, 60 amps in your kitchen, you're like, okay with your stove being fast enough. We realized that no one had ever actually solved the problem of exact temperature control in cooking with like arbitrary pans. And this took over 2 years of R&D and actually basically the entire length of the company to get this to production. But we believe we have objectively solved surface cooking with temperature control, so a stove works like an oven. So instead of like low, medium, and high, you can say 350 and the oil does not smoke.
So because I have one of those induction, the little portable units, and I think it's like 1 to 10 are the settings.
And you don't know what that means?
Yeah, I mean, you get a rough approximation, but I've been in here with you testing stuff. I mean, it's cool. So you can just like really dial it in, and you can kind of keep if you don't want to hit that smoke point or go over on anything, you just keep it at this super static level.
Yeah, and you can basically say like, and we try to make sure that this is like visually clear to the end user. So it's like, hey, if you want to sous vide something, you know that that's not the sear temperature, and we'll basically make clear like, hey, at this temperature you're starting to sear something, or this temperature you're starting to sweat something, or this temperature that's when things start to brown. And so making that clear to people so that they can make the jump from 0 to 10 to something closer to baking, making sure that we kind of hold their hand through that process, because this is obviously in some sense, a new type of device, a new type of stove. It's like not exactly an induction stove anymore. It's this closed loop, like direct temperature.
It's like a new tool. Yeah.
It's a new tool.
Yeah.
And you're able to do a lot of really exciting things with it. So you're able to say, like, let's say you're making mac and cheese. One is the 10 cups of water you need at the very beginning already in a minute and a half. You don't have to wait for all that other stuff. But then when you're actually melting the cheese, or making like the cheese sauce or whatever, like you won't accidentally burn it. You set it to the temperature where the butter melts, and you fold the cheese sauce in, and you're ready to go. And there's no like extra painful steps around like needing to mind the pan or worrying about things burning or things like that. A demo we're going to do later is we'll sous vide a steak, but you can do it just in the pan.
Yeah.
You don't need a plastic bag. You don't need water. You just put the steak in the pan, and you set the pan to close to the temperature you want inside the steak. So you say like, hey, I want the inside of the steak 135, set the pan to 140, and then you go back and flip the steak 2 or 3 times. And in the normal time frame that a sous vide would take, the steak is ready to go. No plastic, no accessories. It just works.
Yeah.
And any stainless steel pan with a lid is all you need there.
Okay. Actually, you got like one white spot on your. Yeah.
I'm like that. Oh, this is shiny. I wonder where that came from.
I saw it. It just popped on. Yeah.
That's not an organic substance. I was like, that's not dandruff unless I'm like a fucking cyborg.
Trying to fix the placement of your mic a little bit. It's a little scratchy.
Okay. You mentioned it, but there's this whole Trojan horse aspect to all this. I mean, so you start by building a burner, and then your major goal is to fill homes with all sorts of appliances with lithium ion batteries. It seems like a kind of crazy plan. Why would one choose to do this?
Yeah, so let's start from kind of the beginning of this, which is it's actually kind of crazy that when you look at the most successful home battery product ever sold, most successful installed home battery product ever sold, which is Powerwall. My understanding from Tesla. My understanding is they've only have about 400,000 homes installed in North America, which is a crazy low number given how, now there's many more Powerwalls installed because many people get like 2 or 3 if you have a big house, but that's a crazy low number given the scale of Tesla's operations, the fact how many cars they sell a year, all this other stuff. This is not as big a business as you would expect, despite the fact that it's like very high salience and most people in this space know what Powerwall is. And so the question really is why? And if you actually are in the market for buying one of these things, it's basically I want backup and security for my house. If the power goes out, I want to make sure that I've got potentially multiple days of security, of energy security. And that's a great feature. The problem is most Americans apparently are not doomsday preppers, despite the fact that that's incredibly culturally salient in America.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, there's examples of like kind of power law distributions of like the people who are really into things are really into them, and thus they become high salience because of that. But like on average, the median American probably doesn't even know what a Powerwall is in some sense.
Well, in California, where we live, there's times when this is a really big issue. I live in the heart of Silicon Valley, which you would think would be very, I don't know, tech forward, and somehow my power's going out all the time. I see this happens in Texas all the time. I don't know, is it just like an issue that it's kind of localized? And
it's highly localized. So it's like if you're in Texas, of course it's a super high salience in Texas. It's super high salience in like, let's call it the NIMBY parts of California, where we didn't build enough electrical infrastructure, or we push people into fire zones where we're not wanting to build new electrical lines and stuff like that, or we turn the lines off during high wind events, which is fairly common as well. So like that's if you're in Silicon Valley, you'll especially if you're up in the hills, you'll encounter those sort of situations. So in some sense, but that's kind of where the high salience of Powerwall exists. But if you're in like Boston area, I had buried power lines as a kid. I think I remember the number of power outages we had in my parents' house like on one hand.
Right.
And this is in a lot of the United States, you have a fairly reliable grid. And on top of that, it's like, you don't necessarily need a battery if like your nominal outage is like an hour. And so what that means is like, there's not pressure from folks like my parents or something like that to like go and get a home battery system, even though like they get crazy winter storms all the time and things like that. But they've not thought of the impetus to get a home battery, for instance. And what I realized was there's got to be a different way to get this technology onto the grid, because it's good for the grid when the grid is alive too. And that's something that is like probably best underappreciated. Because when the grid is alive, you can use the batteries to shift consumption of the end use cases of the grid from peak hours when, say, there's kind of like rush hour on the highway to off-peak hours. You can get the cars over. You can basically, if you think of electricity like cars on a highway and having to do their commute, you can shuttle all those cars over at noon when there's no traffic, or in this case when there's abundant solar. You get them into people's driveways at like before the night, and then they don't end up getting stuck in traffic where you've only got limited number of lanes on the highway or things like that. And you can think of like a highway widen, like you can think of there's two ways to solve this problem. One is you can widen the highway, which is like more transmission, more transformers. You've probably heard of stories of like there's a transformer shortage in the United States. Russia targets Ukraine's energy infrastructure by going after transformers and energy distribution points. Like that's the perceived bottleneck that we need to go and double down on. But if you then look at how we're actually using electricity, we've sized everything for the peak demand on the grid, not the average. And the average is often much lower than the peak. And so if you can essentially put battery storage at the edges of the grid, you can better utilize the existing distribution network without having to necessarily upgrade it.
So, okay, if it's the case that large swaths of people don't face these issues because their power is working pretty well all the time,
Yep.
are you building this product for the future because you see more electric cars coming, we're electrifying everything, and this is preparing for what you think is like the demand curve, the experiences that people have in places like Texas and California are going to spread?
So what I just told you is not what sells with consumers. And this is why batteries have not ended up in every home in America.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like there's only a limited appeal for backup. And what I just explained is not a consumer value proposition. Like, oh, the grid works a little better. It's
Yeah.
not a consumer value proposition. My stove is really awesome, is. And so what we realized was if you can embed this in new devices or new types of or existing categories of devices, but that take existing slots, but you can kind of redefine those devices in now kind of the electrified era, kind of with all the technology from the electric vehicle revolution, you can now drive adoption of battery technology at scale because people want a cool stove. And people wanting a cool fancy stove is much larger of a market because everyone in America, everyone basically has a stove in the United States. 55 million appliances are sold every year in the United States. There's an appliance probably being installed on your block today or this week or something like that. And so if you can access that kind of demand that already exists and basically lead the charge by making the best category of that demand, you now have a real good business case to deploy a ton of batteries and remake the grid.
What's the range of devices you're talking about?
So we want to be, I think there's this concept of like index startup. I think like Elad Gil mentioned this in a tweet recently. We realized, I had a realization after seeing that tweet because I didn't really put this into words exactly, but basically anything with a power cord, we want to be able to power by impulse.
And have a battery in it.
Basically every device that uses electricity that has like a reasonably beefy power cord should have a battery in it. And that's kind of a profound statement, but most of the devices you actually use every day are already like this. Your phone, your laptop, like these video cameras, camping equipment, like basically everything except these kind of like legacy devices that are like as part of the built environment are electric vehicles have a large battery inside them.
Why did you want to do this in the first place? You know, there's going to be people who just say, you're solving a problem that's not that big of a problem. Why do you care if everything has a battery in all the homes?
I'll black pill you a little bit. I wanted to make pizza really fast, and I realized that there was actually a user value proposition to making next generation cooking appliances with this technology. And the example is like, if you want to make a pizza in 90 seconds, like a real brick oven, you need to put thousands of watts into that oven in real time to really cook the pizza. And a normal plug is not going to get you that. But then I looked at, but you're only using that peak power for a very short amount of time. And that was the understanding of the user experience unlock, where I was like, okay, now this can be applied more generically across the appliance space. And it can be applied more generically across even like light industrial, commercial kitchens, et cetera. So like, just like a home stove is not running on max all the time, a commercial kitchen is not doing this, is also doing the same thing. Likewise, like CNC machines are only cutting metal for a certain portion of their use time. It's like 50% or something like that. So this kind of intermittent peak power usage is the paradigm on the grid. So you can take advantage of that idea, make the device more awesome so that it drives adoption, and we can ship some incredible devices starting with the cooktop. And then now you've deployed a lot of batteries.
So this starts as like a passion project just for things you wanted to do and then to make cool stuff. But there is like
There's a bigger story area.
So the master plan came, like, did it just start there and then you found the master plan, or the master plan was always?
The master plan was always there. I actually dug up a deck we made, a deck I made in 2019. I should have actually just like, I was working at Meta at the time, or the company formerly known as Facebook at the time, on virtual reality controllers, leading a program there. And this is right before the pandemic, before everything got scrambled and delayed me getting started here. But the pitch at that point was straight up, we're going to build a bunch of large appliances with batteries in them. They'll be more powerful and performant than anything else on the market. The stove will have temperature control. And when you install these in the house, they will have bidirectional inverters built into them. So you can share the energy from the battery with the home and the grid. So it's not just you install the battery and it helps boost the power of the device, but it also shares the energy with the home and the grid. And you basically build instead of having one centralized battery in your house, you have like 3 or 4 major appliances. And those basically bit by bit build the equivalent of, say, a Tesla Powerwall without you actually needing to install one in a new slot or doing bulk rewiring of your house, mucking with your electrical panel, doing kind of this $6,000 installation that is pretty common with a home battery system on top of the cost of the home battery system.
And you're making a bet, well, correct me if I'm wrong, you're making a bet that we get more electric cars, we're building all these AI data centers, that there's going to be more demand, we should make these things, we should get ahead of this. Well, we're already kind of behind, I guess, but get on top of this, make things smarter, have this option.
So the big thing also is there's going to be a traffic jam on the grid effectively. So basically there's like AI data centers, like if you're thinking about like at the grid scale, like AI data centers are adding just a ton of new demand. We're going to need to build new power plants, some of which could be co-located with these data centers. But additionally, everyone's getting an electric car. Everyone's putting an electric car charger in their house. That electric car charger maybe uses 60 amps. Your typical home electrical connection for the whole house is 200. But then you think, what other devices are going electric? Your stove, currently 60. If you go from a gas stove to electric induction stove. Your heat pump, maybe similar. Water heater, similar. So you end up in this situation where you very quickly run out of space, and there's going to be, in some sense, contention from all of these new use cases going electric at the same time. And I should also take a step back and be like, why are people going to go electric? It's not just a climate change argument. It's straight up, these are better technologies. It's like, you have a heat pump because it's also your air conditioner. It just happens to also, it runs backwards and heats your house. Water heater, again, same thing. You can actually save energy on that and have a lower bill than you would have with gas. Induction stoves are generally better than gas stoves, but we can debate that. I think our stove is clearly better than all other stoves, but that's a topic for another day. And then the list kind of goes on. Electric cars are clearly better and higher performance than gas cars at this point. And so basically what's happened is, especially with the electric vehicle revolution, there's now this new set of core technologies that will eventually roll out to the rest of the market. Just like how smartphone technology has rolled out to kind of like every device getting a little chunk of a smartphone inside it over the past 10 years, every device is going to have a little chunk of an electric vehicle inside it over the next 10 years.
So okay, I'm gonna change gears for a second. 'Cause I have seen, and there are companies, there's a startup in Texas I wrote about called Base Power.
Yep.
It's Michael Dell's son. I mean, they're selling this unit that you put on the outside of your house to help get you through these fluctuations in demand. They structure it by more or less giving you that device for not free, but a low cost. And then they become your energy provider. And then they're using all these batteries to try to ride the grid, make some money in arbitrage, but also smooth things out for consumers. Your approach is just that instead of attaching this thing and installing it on the outside of your house, maybe you have like 5 or 6 appliances in your house that are sharing this load.
You bought a cool stove and it just happens to wedge in. So I think Base is a good comparison because it's actually like, I think it's a fundamentally different business, which is actually, I think it's the other good way to do this, if that makes any sense. So reading this back to you, like Base in some sense is an electric utility that happens to deploy batteries as part of their distribution play effectively. Yeah. So like they'll put a battery in your house and they'll put a battery on your house and that's part of like, they'll essentially manage that battery as part of their distribution network effectively. In our case, it's kind of like, we're giving you a device that gives you new capabilities for your house that from a consumer value prop standpoint. Now, we're also putting batteries in your house. We can also make money in the same ways that they make money in terms of like grid services and all this other stuff. But it's a little different because we don't have to override your electrical plan. We don't have to basically compete with like Pacific Gas and Electric or whoever on that side. Now, it's also kind of different in a different way, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later, which is there's kind of different ways to slice the stack here. If you can index like electricity and you can be like, you're then a utility effectively. You're like or in Base's case, they're kind of like a virtual utility that also manages batteries on top of it. In our case, we're more of like a power electronics company. So if you embed Impulse's technology, which we're marketing this to other brands as well, and we call it Impulse Core. If you embed that technology in your end device, it makes your end device much more awesome. Maybe you get temperature control if you're a stove. Maybe you get other capabilities if you're another device. But that lets us kind of index anything with a power cord. And that means we're much more of like a power electronics company than a energy company.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. And there is part of this is selling these directly to consumers, and you're starting with the
cooktop. Yeah. So we're selling a induction cooktop. You can buy it at impulselabs.com. And if you order now, I think you're going to ship like early summer timeframe, based on my latest estimates. And that includes our full stack of technology. So that's basically it's a induction cooktop with 4 burners that are 10,000 watts each. So instead of 3,000 watts for like a normal induction stove, it's like 3.3x more powerful. It has a 3 kilowatt hour lithium iron phosphate battery that boosts the power another 15 kilowatts on top of what the wall can supply. And it's got all the technology to basically build this decentralized grid vision we've got, where we can send power from the battery back into the home and onto the grid with software we're going to be rolling out over the coming year.
And then there's a whole other part to the business where you've built all these insides to this that other appliance makers could put into their products if they want.
Yeah, so there's a meta story here, which was we started building this because we were like, let's start from first principles and build the best possible stove we could build. And we then did this we basically had to do this a bunch of different times. So like, I'll show you all the iterations of the product. But as we kind of got closer and closer to the final product, and we built like order of magnitude hundreds of samples of this thing, including testing our manufacturing process and all this other stuff before we actually locked in on a production intent unit that we're shipping to customers. We ended up on a very modular design that allows you kind of plug and play battery, inverter, different power electronics components, the burners, the temperature sensors, all that stuff is all built in a modular way so we can support different configurations of the device. And that kind of gave us an opportunity. We did that just out of the fact that this was the right way to design the product. But then at the same time, now that we've kind of made a bunch of buzz, like people find out about us on Twitter and LinkedIn and all other stuff, we've been getting a lot of demand from existing appliance manufacturers to partner and embed our technology in their products. And that's kind of where the next step is. And so taking yet another step back and kind of laying the groundwork, the automotive industry is famous for this. So pre-Tesla, basically, if you wanted to build a car, you would go to like Bosch and Continental, like a handful of these tier 1 suppliers, and you essentially had a list of Lego bricks you could build a car out of. And if the thing wasn't on the list, you'd have to like get it on their roadmap, which means like 5+ years later, maybe you could get an 8.3-inch infotainment screen or something like that. And Tesla went and they were like, that's ridiculous. Let's go and like actually design the parts with like a consumer electronics supply chain. And now we have a 15.6-inch screen in like the Model 3. And much better, and we'll vertically integrate the software. The software is not written by some sub-vendor of a sub-vendor. You design it like you design a phone, not like you designed a car. And even until this day, the legacy automakers have had trouble catching up to this new way of working with this much more integrated design approach. And this is also why like the Chinese OEMs have really stood out, because they have that knowledge from the consumer electronics industry. They build all our consumer electronics on how to actually do this. So the appliance industry has this exact same problem. If you go and buy an induction stove today, odds are it has one company, also based in Germany's Power Electronics inside it. So it means that when you go and select your 0 through 9 on the thing, with maybe you get half steps if you get the slightly more expensive version of it.
I did get a mediocre one.
So you may not get the half steps. You may only get that goes through a circuit board, like that control board, and the power electronics, and like the induction coil. All of that is like a kit that you can buy. And the major appliance OEMs have basically, because there's not been a ton of innovation in this space, they've essentially outsourced the electronics expertise to companies like this. And even if they wanted to do it, if you wanted to even change something as simple as like a knob and make the knob behavior a little different, you have to go and recertify the product, where you have to go through this compliance rigmarole. And it's not just like FCC, you pass the like emissions so that the like when the FCC truck drives by, it doesn't like give you a fine or whatever. It's you have to pass what's called underwriters laboratories, like UL compliance certifications. And this is all kind of arcane, a little bit narrow in terms of interest, but basically what ends up happening is there's just this large regulatory lift that you have to do to make it even legal to install a product in someone's house.
Okay. Well, and I'm going to save some bits for when we're like talking about the product, because I want to get into the manufacturing, all the technology behind this. But it'll be cool when we're
that sounds good.
Standing over thing. I feel like you would not be offended by this. You're a weird dude. Your mind works in weird ways.
I'm a weird dude. Yeah. I've been accused of being weird.
You're a personality on Twitter. I feel like I have, or X, whatever the hell it's called. And then
I've been accused of looking like other Twitter personalities.
like who?
Like Growing Daniel, one of my portfolio founders.
I've never seen him in like. You look like his icon, or
no. So people just thought I looked like a fat version of him when someone used the fat filter on him. That's the actual story.
And you're. I hear about you from. I'm like, someone will send me a DM. Some offshoot of like one of Nat Friedman's weird side quests, and you're like always involved. You seem.
Oh yeah, the Shroud of Turin.
Yeah, but
thing.
but you just like generally you have like weird. You seem to have weird hobbies and pursuits.
Yeah, that one was figured out a theory on the Shroud of Turin while at my favorite Mexican restaurant in San Francisco, and I was just like, then I texted Nat and I was like, long story, but yeah.
Yeah, but and then. Career-wise, you just spent a ton of time in like the VR.
I was a face computer person.
Yeah, you did Oculus, Meta. I think there's one.
Oculus.
I'm missing.
Or Oculus, Google, or Google, Oculus, Google, Oculus.
And you were working on VR,
VR, AR
headsets.
stuff. So yeah, I've actually worked on police robots back in the day. It was kind of like a proto Anduril out of the Founders Fund universe, called Robotex. Was doing that. Then I was an intern on Google Glass, and ended up converting to full time there. But what was interesting with that was I actually got mistargeted in my role. This was a really, when I say mistargeted, it was actually good in retrospect. I was like an electrical engineering major, but mostly like a software, like I did a lot of software firmware sort of development stuff. Because I had done some stuff with cameras before, I became a camera hardware intern. And it turns out that has very little to do with system electrical design, because the circuit board for like a camera module like in your glasses or your phone, it's relatively simple. And there's not a lot of software because that's done by a different team. That's done by like a image processing team or something like that. But it had everything to do with manufacturing and manufacturing quality and testing and how to work with like joint development programs in Asia. And it turns out that that was actually the perfectly scoped small program to learn the ropes of how to build stuff at scale.
Okay.
In like using the supply basically using the supply chains that are amazing out over there to prototype really quickly.
Okay, but you're spending what? You probably spent what, 6-7 years working on VR, AR stuff?
Yeah,
total?
so it was 2012 to 2021.
And then one day you're trying to make a pizza. You're like, now I'm going to dedicate my life to stoves.
Well, so it was actually this like I think it was actually, yeah, the thinking I think it was in Japan at a haptics conference. So I worked most recent program I worked on was the Quest Pro controller.
Okay.
For Meta. So it had SLAM tracking on the controller. So it was actually controller had 3 cameras on it and like a full phone processor. It was a kind of a ridiculous product. But I was at a haptics conference because we were looking at all the kind of the vibration motors and like various like buttons and stuff you can go get in Japan of all places. And there's this really good pizza place called Savoy in Azabu-Juban, which you should go to if you're ever there. And they ripped my pizza out in like 30 seconds to 45 seconds. And I'm like, okay, I want that at my house. How the hell do I get that? And realized this was like fundamentally a power limited thing. Went down this rabbit hole of like, how fast could you cook a pizza without it like looking like Sarah Connor in that Terminator flash forward where she gets vaporized. Like it's like with the nukes or whatever, but like it's like speaking of weird analogies, but basically turns out it's like 45 seconds or whatever. And I realized this was fundamentally a power limited activity. And that quickly got me thinking to, well, I only needed to do, I'm not ripping pizzas continuously. There's not like a continuous like conveyor belt pizza situation going on with pizzas. You put it in, you take it out.
Yeah.
There's time in between to recycle. So let me do some calculations and figure out how much energy do I need to like flash a pizza with like infrared light in like 5,000, 10,000 watts sort of zone, and realized this was very well scoped for a lithium iron phosphate battery pack.
Okay. And are you like into cooking?
I'm into cooking too. So like
Yeah.
I've got like restaurant owner in my family, chef in my family. My mom and dad love to cook, so grew up cooking.
I see you getting dragged on Twitter sometimes.
Oh yeah, no, I get
your technique and
so well. I mean, I think part of this is like I've been barbecuing a lot, so I got really into, so as part of doing a lot of the travel in Asia for manufacturing supply chain, I got super into Chinese barbecue of all things. So it's another recommendation: go to Northern China Barbecue in San Francisco if you want a taste of this. But basically, it's almost like food from the Muslim world / Central Asia made it out to China, and because it's got a lot of cumin and it's lamb, it's really tasty. And so make a lot of basically lamb skewers, stuff like that. So I got like all the right charcoal grill set up and I did all this sort of things where I went and bought the equipment to actually do it properly. And then when my friends who moved from over there like went and tried it, they're like, yeah, you actually got this right. And I was like, cool, I'm not a cultural appropriator. I'm an implementer.
I like how you do the give and take on X with the people.
Oh yeah, people just roast me, yeah. And then then also people give me ideas too, because one guy was like, you should try to cook an egg this way, and we can do it later. But basically he was like, you might not even need oil to get the egg to work if you can hold the temperature precisely.
Yeah.
And so I went and basically just like tried it, and it turns out the bottom looks like a pancake, not like it doesn't fry because there's no oil. So I pick it up and I'm like, why does this look like a pancake in the bottom? So I posted like, I made a weird egg, and that went viral.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like we caught most of what I want to do in here.
there's some other stuff that we should actually talk about, which is I think the platform side of things, which is so. Since we last talked, I think I was going to tell you something, or basically when I last talked, it was like, if you went and were like, show me your 5-year plan, show me what you're actually going to do here, and it would have basically been, I think I'll actually use Tesla as the analogy here. It would have been what people think of the Tesla master plan. It's like build a fast car, then build a slightly cheaper luxury car, then build like a Model 3 type product, and work and kind of increase scale as you work down the cost curve.
Yeah, the Cybertruck gets harder to wedge in there, but
so what was interesting was that was the framing that I had in my head, and it turns out that that's actually consumer electronics companies are probably one of the hardest things to do in the tech industry. Period. You're either bootstrapped and never raise venture, or you're dead. Yeah. Is like kind of like I'll just bluntly say that it's very, very, very much common. Like,
well, it has to be good, and
the number of independent successes. Actually, think of the number of independent successes in the space.
Yeah.
It may be like one guy is pretty much responsible for all of them.
For consumer electronics startups?
Yeah, for ones that are now still independent.
Yeah.
And made it to IPO or made it to like escape velocity.
The only thing I can think of in this moment is the Roomba, but
yeah, it's like iRobot, but they had it's iRobot.
Dyson. Well,
it's Tesla.
Tesla. Yeah.
It's Starlink.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah. Guys, Dyson, but Dyson I think was bootstrapped.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
So the number of successes here is like vanishingly small.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to wonder, like, okay, so you go talk to investors on this sort of stuff, and it's like, that's not necessarily the most compelling story. We're like, yeah, we can get this thing to sell. We can sell 100,000 units of this, no problem. And I actually think this product is exceptional, and I think we can totally do it. But I don't necessarily want to be the one trying to convince people and turn the screws on that. So we figured out a not pivot, basically. And I want to call this kind of like a straight up not pivot. Because we were already doing this before we realized that we just need to emphasize this more. And the realization was basically we had built this amazing power electronics platform like Impulse Core. This lets you make a device like the cooktop that Trojan horses batteries onto the grid. But the thing is, I've talked to a bunch of people in the appliance industry. The hardest thing in the appliance industry is actually distribution. You see some cool thing on Twitter, you're like, oh, I saw Stove Guy's like cool egg demo, or I made fun of him for his bag egg crack or whatever. But like that thing seems pretty cool, maybe I'll go buy it. You're not impulse buying any appliance.
Impulse?
Yeah, like pun intended. You're not impulse buying any appliance.
Yeah.
And you're probably talking to some hoity-toity designer, no offense to the designers listening, who's giving you recommendations. And then they're going to go basically you're going to get some kind of comprehensive like interior architect thing, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, this impulse product's cool, and put it in there. But how do you get to that person? And it's like, we're in the design district in San Francisco. There's all these appliance showrooms with like a million different options. It's actually this much more analog distribution network that looks like it's even more fragmented than the car dealership network. And also like even less liquidity, because like you can always get an extra car. You can always buy like a sports car, and like your partner can get mad at you or whatever, because you can always park it on the street. But a stove, it's like there's a slot for it in your house, and you have to intercept a remodel. You have to do like these sort of things. So it's like a much more intentional purchase. But there were 55 million appliances sold every year in the United States. So how do we get into that like slipstream, basically? Yeah. Like how do we get into the jet stream? And we realized that because we're the only company in the West that basically is vertically integrated kind of from this like first principles way, and the only company with this like awesome temperature control and battery technology, we're able to market ourselves to major appliance OEMs, give them this capability, and then they unlock the distribution for us. And that's in parallel to us offering awesome first party products as well.
Yeah.
And so what's really interesting about this is, so that was the first part of it. And then I realized, what did Tesla actually do? Let's actually look at not the Tesla secret master plan that's on the website, but let's look at how they got from Roadster. Let's look at Tesla in 08, because I think that's actually maybe the better analogy here. How did Tesla in 08 get through their IPO to the Model S? And it was Daimler and Toyota
shitting
Where
the
they-
bed and having a factory, Tesla could move.
Well,
into.
no. So there's the Toyota, there's a Toyota GM
Yeah.
shitting the bed thing, but they had partnerships for the Rav4 EV and for like I think it was, I'm maybe misremembering this because I was almost a child back then, but basically like a Model S like car
Yeah.
from Mercedes. But they had essentially landed the like Roadster plus power electronics and battery platform into those products, and those firms also did invest as well. But that guaranteed the fact that there'd be dealerships selling Tesla's underlying electrification platform at serious scale.
Yeah.
Because those because essentially investors knew that Toyota and Daimler know how to sell cars.
Right, and they had the powertrain.
And then Tesla had this thing they did not have, which is the powertrain.
Yeah.
And very interestingly, that was actually, that's left out on the kind of secret master plan retelling, but it turns out that is actually how Tesla has levered up every single time. It was first this like powertrain lever, then it turns out they managed to scale their own first party products better and faster than these partnerships and replace them. But like that said, it still was like a good idea. But then now it's like autonomy, robotics, all this other stuff where these are things that Tesla can offer to other manufacturers as well. Like I think they're making some of the charging components and things like that. They're already starting to do some of this infrastructure for others, but they've done this at every step of the company. Like every 5 years is kind of a slightly different framing on this, but that's always been their way of like accessing a new market by levering up into like using existing players that already have the distribution to get into that market, basically.
Like I get it. There's like complication to the story because a lot of what you design gets made in China, and then if you're being slotted into somebody else's product, Silicon Valley is all about like the flashy startup, the brands in your face. If you guys are lurking a little bit more in the back, I know you could probably make a ton of money, but it's like a different approach.
So I think there's kind of two things. One is you have to lead the way where you have to show a flashy product. Like this cooktop's going to be available for sale.
Yeah.
And like we're working on making sure there's additional channels beyond just D2C available in the coming months for buying it, seeing it, experiencing it. But additionally, if you want to index everything with a power cord, you need to do this other strategy, because it's like we're not going to make every electrified device that ever exists, but we could very well be part of the power infrastructure for many of them.
Right. No, and then I mean it could be a great business. It's just slightly different sometimes. In these partners, they would all have their own app and
No,
you
no, so I want to be careful on what I say on this sort of thing, but a big factor in this space is a lot of these partners are essentially system integrators with distribution networks. They would buy not just the circuit boards and things like that, but also like the software, the cloud systems, the battery management software, all of that sort of stuff is like a package we offer.
And everybody, but then is the consumer ultimately coming to like the Impulse app, no matter which?
So we'll work through the specific nuances of that, like in the future, because some of this stuff is to be discussed in certain ways. But the target is that every device that's powered by Impulse, you will know is powered by Impulse in the same way that Intel successfully rolled this out.
Okay, that's cool. Cool. Well, should we do some cooking and check this thing out?
Yeah, that sounds good.
The inside.
Yeah. We can look inside too.
I'll do a couple questions just so we have it. I mean, you grew up in Massachusetts?
Yeah, I grew up in Massachusetts.
And do you come from like an engineering family?
No. My parents are both lawyers.
They're both lawyers.
One of the reasons I'm not rich from crypto is my dad is a securities lawyer. No, I'm joking. He was correct.
And were you science-minded, engineering?
Yeah, science and engineering minded, and kind of got given kind of free rein to figure out what was interesting. Like my brother is a professor in Japan.
Okay.
Teaching Japanese history.
So you were making stuff when you were a kid, or?
I was making stuff when I was a kid.
Like what?
You get started with like, I think you get started with like, Duplo or whatever, that's how you get started. But basically it's like, it quickly got to like soldering and parents getting concerned that I was inhaling too many lead fumes and like that sort of stuff. Ended up building like all sorts of random gadgets and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, and a lot of this experience ended up being kind of like additive. I also spent a ton of time doing software like projects on my own. So this was like video game engine, basically did like a from scratch video game engine one time. Then maybe on my GitHub, don't look at it, please. But stuff like that. I ended up doing a lot of self-initiated projects. And then when I got to college, out on the West Coast, I was on the Stanford solar car team. And that was probably...
It's always the solar car
It's always the solar car team. So the solar car team is infamous for basically incubating the OGs of Tesla, effectively.
Yeah, JB Straubel.
And Dorian West
Yeah.
and some other folks.
Yeah.
So like they're like and I know a couple of them. They're all great. Actually, I've never talked to JB, but he was on the same flight to China as me one time, like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, that was such a great full stack engineering experience. Like if you're like, I would suggest anyone in college go to like, there's always some student engineering team. It could be a rocket team. It could be a solar
I'm
car
not
team.
kidding. It's like always the solar car team. This has a lasting effect.
The rocket
on
teams are
people.
the rocket teams are starting to
Also
compete
a
a little
good
bit
one, a
because
good
it
one,
turns out that children can make liquid fueled rockets these days. I don't know how that seems pretty sweet, but that would have nerd set me probably back then.
Yeah.
But did a lot of firmware and some electrical, and that was kind of a really good like practical thing because a lot of the classes don't teach you how to do like circuit board design or writing code that could kill someone or things like that.
And were you actually doing electrical engineering or computer science or?
I was electrical engineering, but most of the classes I took were the CS classes. So it's kind of almost a fake electrical engineering major.
So you should stick with the electrical. That's legit.
Yeah.
I like it.
Because I realized that too many people were becoming computer science majors back then. And then that was like graduating undergrad in 2012. That was during the mobile app boom. I was like the same year as like Evan Spiegel and some of the other folks. But then the crazy part was a couple years after I graduated, it went from like, oh, there's like 50 people in the intro CS class to like there's 500 and they need to do 2 different lecture sessions. And it's like now this sort of situation. I'm assuming it's going to contract now and like everyone should go back to being electrical engineers because I don't know, Claude and GPT, and Chat GPT are going to eat your lunch.
Yeah.
But, and maybe electrical engineers have like 3 or 5 years left. I'm joking.
No, that is a useful skill, I think. Yeah.
So the thing I think that was the craziest learning was like there's such this like ego part of like of getting like kind of the design slot. Like I got to design like this board or I got to design like this subsystem on the product. Or for the solar car, especially, it was like I got to do like the specific like I get to do the like the steering wheel board or the like telemetry board or the various other things like that. You end up, and if you own that slot, it's kind of like a pride thing. What I found very quickly after graduating was I got sucked into testing and vendor management and all these other things, but I thought was like decidedly unsexy. But I realized how much leverage you end up having if you can almost like control the end product by building the right specifications and the right tests, and then diving really deep into like kind of the details and solving problems as they pop up.
Yeah.
Like when something fails a test, figure out why, do the failure analysis, and like build enough quantity of units because you're in the consumer electronics space. You can afford to build. Even here, we built like hundreds of stoves. Like you can build like thousands of units and make sure statistically you've built something that will last in the millions.
Isn't not impossible. Obviously, isn't San Francisco an expensive place to do a startup like this?
Well, I mean, so it's got some of the best talent in the world, but there's definitely like I would say that there's this situation of like, I do not think we could have pulled off a product this complex with a vertically integrated team where we had all of the, like everyone touching the product and the production was based here. Even if we did our production in like Southeast Asia and had like very cheap like operator labor and stuff like that. The reason is like to do a hardware program of this complexity, you need all these different disciplines, like almost fractionally. Like you need like someone to design injection molding tooling. You need like you need people to like set up the machines. You need people to write all the like tests for like even like less complicated parts of the system. Like a lot. You need people to manage like surface mount assembly and stuff like that. And we're still at the low volume point versus like an iPhone where it's like, oh, the iPhones have like 100 lines that each can do like 1 million units a year or something.
Yeah.
Like, I'm probably getting this number wrong, but like we're definitely in a different order of magnitude. But what that would mean is you still need like all of these disciplines a little bit to get a product like this out. And it's so much better if you can partner with a contract manufacturer that's got those capabilities in-house and you can actually leverage them fractionally to scale. Kind of like how startups get fractional CFOs or something like that. You actually really want a fractional production engineering team, basically. And that was a thing that basically, it was kind of the giving away your Legos realization from like the pride of like, hey, I get to build my own circuit board on the solar car team to now I'm writing specs and maybe some test code. And was like, that was kind of the ego death required to get there.
Yeah.
Is one of the things that led to, hey, today we're basically giving away some of the implementation to, we're not giving away, but basically like leveraging our supply chain to deliver some of the engineering.
And we'll get into it a little bit later, but just what's behind us? I mean, this is where you guys have actually been building the prototypes and.
So we built some of the prototypes, actually since we moved into this office. So this look like, I've actually been asked like, hey, is this a factory? Like you've got this big space, whatever. This is a lab. And so all our units are built at a contract manufacturer. We actually have two, one for the battery, one for the cooktop. And a lot of these are like we unbox and actually do like failure analysis, test small changes, update firmware, update circuit boards, like various other things like that. So all this stuff are kind of like experiments in progress with like production intent units that came off a real production line. So despite the fact that it looks busy, almost like, and maybe like industrial-ish, it's actually a lab, not a factory.
But you have been doing like the different iterations of the product.
Yeah. So, and we'll show you that too. Is like at our previous office, we did build multiple iterations of in person, like we built those. And the key thing was actually, until you figure out the rough architecture, you don't necessarily want to go kick it over the wall and start scaling.
Yeah.
But as soon as you know the architecture, every choice you make on the smaller end, you end up sourcing the right parts through the supply chain. Like you're actually playing for keeps once you're past that point, and you don't have to go revise it. So if I went and built like a perfect, like the first unit that looks like our product that we built was actually built at our factory. With the supply chain. Some of the parts were maybe 3D printed or things like that, but those get subsumed with tooled parts in the next build, and then the fidelity starts improving build by build. And we actually did, we're thinking how many builds we did with our manufacturing partner. It's like, it's depending on how you count it, like 4 to 5.
Yeah.
Like discrete iterations where we change substantial parts of the system, basically.
Okay.
And this is very common in most consumer electronics programs, basically.
And then, so what are the different stations? I mean, you've got like battery test, you're doing temperature testing on things.
Yeah, so like one of the most complicated parts of the system is the temperature sensor. So to make a stove that can set and hold an exact temperature is something that basically doesn't exist. And when we say that, it's like we can do it inside the pan. We're essentially solving for the temperature of the top surface of the pan, which is not something that anyone has done before. And we actually filed a bunch of IP around this technology. We'll show you what that means, with some of the cooking demos. But that meant we had to build a new type of temperature sensor, and it's got like, it's not just like a thermometer or a thermocouple or a thermistor or whatever with 2 leads, and you just like solder that to the system and it's good to go. It's like, it's got like 6 leads on it or something like that. So this is a much more complicated system with a bunch of glue and very like multiple materials that have to work together and a bunch of like tooled parts that are all reasonably, they're both small and complicated, and making sure that we actually go, like when we build and integrate that, which is not a super expensive assembly, but it is like something that requires it's a complicated module basically.
Yeah.
And making sure that we actually test that sub-assembly and verify that it works, that's something that has taken a ton of time and basically the entire length of the company to get that right. And now we're very confident in our ramping production, obviously, but that's been one of the bigger challenges. So I can show you kind of what we've been up to there. And then obviously, yeah, like the battery and the inverter and some of the other pieces of the system, like we're doing something that's interacting with the grid. And so there's a bunch of different, you can be charging, you could be discharging into the grid, you could be discharging into the stove, you can be doing a lot of different things. So like making sure that we test all the software and firmware interactions there is a big deal. And then, a lot of other stuff around thermal testing. So a lot of the things I'll show you too are like, we do tests with like a reference pan. We make sure that the pan doesn't get too hot for like oil to light on fire in the pan. And that's a standard safety test that UL requires you to do. UL being the primary like safety standards body for compliance in the United States. But basically we end up having to do a battery of tests on the product to make sure that it is functionally safe. And then we basically do the pre-tests, some of the pre-tests here, those get repeated at actual like certified labs effectively, and then that turns into certifications that give people confidence when they buy the product.
Do you feel like George Foreman dying is giving you an opening?
I don't want to joke around about legends of the past, but I do think George Foreman grill was very good for bulgogi. I will say that. But it's actually very interesting. Is the George Foreman grill is actually, it is a temperature. I think it is a temperature controlled grill because the griddle surface is actually they can control the temperature, and so there's an interesting point of this where like this actually goes to the surface cooking thing. If you can hold temp, like one of the reasons you can make an indoor grill is you prevent the temperature of the surface from being above the smoke point of the fats and oils in the meat.
Okay.
And if you can do that, you don't get smoke. And that's why the George Foreman grill doesn't trip your fire alarm.
It was a much better answer to a very stupid question.
I'm weird like that.
Okay, I think we're good.